Good night, everyone. Good night. Welcome to our leadership conversations. I am your host with the most, Colin McDermott. It's a privilege to be on here again another week, beginning of the start of another week. I'm glad to have the opportunity to be alive, to enjoy this change in weather. So glad that the winter is finally over for the most part. Appreciate it for everyone tuning in tonight. Good evening, Providence Asha. Thanks for tuning in. Thank you to everybody that's watching. I always look forward to these Monday conversations, these leadership conversations on Monday, because it gets me excited to be able to freely converse and talk about leadership, and to be able to talk about some of the things that I'm passionate about. Good evening, Sister Susan. God bless you. It feels good. It's good to be able to talk about something that I'm very passionate about, and that is leadership. I always look forward to these Monday conversations. It is talk about leadership, something that I'm passionate about. It's always a privilege to be able to share the things that I've been getting. It was a really good weekend for me. I hope it was a good weekend for each and every one of you that is on tonight. It was truly a good weekend for me, in the sense that was able to participate in a leadership conference, which I was able to really get a lot from. And so, good evening, Providence Dahima. Was able to get something from this leadership summit that I attended virtually over the weekend, that my wife and I attended. It was such a refresher to know that there are other leaders on bigger stages, bigger platforms, that are talking about the same things that I'm talking about. It was a leadership summit with that Bishop T.D. Jakes held over the weekend, and he had various different speakers from all over the country, actually all over the world, speaking on different topics, and it felt good to be able to know that they're having the same conversations that we're having, that even on their level they're talking about teaching on the same things that are important in terms of leadership and being effective as leaders. So I truly appreciate being able to have this conversation tonight. We're continuing our discussion on the crown and the cross. I just want to know how many people have enjoyed this conversation, this topic that we've been discussing. Feel free to type it in the chat. Let me know. Have you been enjoying these conversations that we've been having, as we'll be talking about some of the good, the bad, and the ugly of leadership? It's important to understand and to know that although we may be called and anointed to do great things, we have a responsibility to be good leaders and influential leaders, and so that requires us being able to take what we are learning and be able to inspire others, to touch the hearts and the minds of others, and really to help others to be great. It's one thing to be great yourself, but when you're able to add value to others, and that's our mandate as people of God, is that we are all working together to draw closer to this thing called greatness, so that we can ultimately reach that ultimate goal of hearing, "Well done, my good and faithful servant." I don't know about anybody, but I learned from anybody else, but I learned from a young age that my aim and my drive and my passion and my goal is to hear those words, "Well done, my good and faithful servant." It's not about being the most wealthiest or the smartest or the brightest or the most popular, but hearing that one saying, that one sentence from our Father, to say, "Well done." And so it is truly a privilege to be able to share some of the things that I've gathered, and to help add value to every person that's on here, that every person that's watching, to help add value so that we all can get to that place of hearing those words, "Well done." So we're continuing our conversation, and in preparing for this discussion today, I start to think about a conversation that Prophetess Dahima and my wife and I had last week after last week's conversation, and we were talking about some things. We had a very deep discussion, and Prophetess Dahima, thank you so much for your contribution. Thank you so much for because you bringing that topic up last week really sparked. Got the wheels turning. It got me really thinking and thinking about the importance of understanding what we have to do as leaders and understanding some of the responsibilities that we have as leaders. And the conversation we were having, we're talking about people not being able to receive correction or receive a strong word from people in positions of authority, as apostles and prophets and pastors, teachers, higher positions of authorities that require them to exert or to carry out something high levels of authority, right? And the conversation sparked the idea that people. Good evening, Minister Catherine. Good evening, Ashley. The conversation really sparked the idea that so many people are not receptive when they receive words of correction or they receive any kind of strong words that they may dislike, and especially in the time that we're in, where people, as the Bible says, that they become more lovers of themselves more than lovers of God, and so they're more willing to receive certain things, certain words from certain people, and they're not willing to receive from others. And part of the thing that I mentioned in the conversation that we were having was the fact that as leaders, right? And this is something that I want to talk about tonight. As leaders, we have to be able to learn how to connect with others. And so that's what I wanted to kind of continue the conversation in a sense. But as leaders, we have to understand that there is a danger in disconnect. There's a danger that comes with disconnecting. Now, before I get there, we talked about last week about the importance of self-leadership. We talked about, good evening, Minister Shanice, thank you for tuning in. Brother Jacques, thanks for tuning in, man, I appreciate it. We have to understand, right, so we talked about last week the importance of self-leadership, right? How before we can lead others, we have to learn to lead ourselves. And so in that process of leading ourselves, there are certain things, certain prerequisites that we have to have. There are certain things that we have to do in terms of leading ourselves before we try to lead others. We have to understand that it's important that we have self-care. Right? We take care of ourselves, we take care of our minds, our bodies, our spiritual lives, our emotional lives. We have to make sure as leaders that we take care of that before we try to lead others. When you refuse to take care of those things, it becomes a detriment and dangerous to others, to those that you are leading. So as leaders, we have to be able to take care of ourselves. Then we have to have self-awareness, making sure that our beliefs match up with our behavior. There are many times that we preach something and we teach something and we say some things that don't line up with how we behave. And so it is important that as leaders, we have to have self-awareness. This is where I am, and this is where I need to be, and now I need to actively work to get from where I am to where I need to be. Right? And then we have to be careful. We have to also train our self-talk, how we talk to ourselves. As leaders, it's easy to encourage others, but you have to learn to start encouraging yourself. There will be times where you don't feel like doing what you're called to do. There are times where you just don't feel it. And so you have to be as David did, to encourage yourself. There will be times, especially as leaders, where one thing I gotta say, that people think as leaders that you have it together, right? They think that you have it all, everything is all good, that you have no problems in the world, and if you have a problem, right, you can just you're in the right position to solve it. But the truth of the matter is, as leaders, we tend to have just as much, if not more, problems than the people that we're leading. And so sometimes we want encouragement from others, and it doesn't come. And so we have to learn to have better self-talk, talk to ourselves in positive manner, encourage ourselves, have positive affirmations, things that we confess to ourselves so that we can continue leading. So that's what we talked about last week in terms of self-leadership. This week I want to talk about the importance of connection, right? Because a lot of people know how to communicate, but they don't know how to connect. And one of the most important aspects, and sometimes one of the most neglected aspects of leadership, is the ability to connect to others. There are so many people who are great at communication, right? And as leaders, we have to know how to communicate. That's first and foremost. We have to know how to communicate. You have to know how to be able to communicate vision, how to communicate direction, how to communicate intention, how to communicate information, right? So you have to develop, and that's something that we have to always, as leaders on a daily basis, strive to grow in. Our ability to communicate. We have to be able to communicate these things. We have to be able to know where our purpose is, know what our vision is, and be able to properly communicate that message. Right? As leaders, you got to be encouraging, you got to be empowering, you got to be motivating, you got to be problem solving, you got to be affirming, right? You got to be able to listen. You got to be able to direct. You got to be able to make decisions. All of these things require us to have strong communication skills. And so it's important. It's important as leaders that we know how to communicate. It's hard for anyone to follow a person who doesn't know how to communicate. Now, when I say communicate, I'm not talking about being able to give inspiring speeches, right? That's another gift. Speech giving is another skill altogether. But to be able to communicate, right, in all kinds of forms. So as leaders, we have to be able to do that. If you're going to get others to follow your vision, to see your vision, and to help you build that vision, you have to be able to communicate. You have to be able to speak their language, right? You have to be, every organization, every vision has a language. One thing that I learned this weekend from the leadership conference that I attended was that excellence has a language, right? Every vision has a language, and excellence has a language. How do we accomplish excellence in what we're doing, right? Excellence means something different to each person. To everybody, it means something different. So it is important as the leader that you establish what excellence is for your organization and be able to communicate that in your particular language. Now, when I say language, I'm not talking about German or French or English or from my Jamaicans patois, right? I'm not talking about that, but I'm talking about what is the language of your ministry? What is the language of your organization? What is the language of your business? Right? You have to be able to know the language, to speak the language and be able to communicate in that language. Right? You go to McDonald's, right? You don't go to McDonald's and order a Whopper. You don't order a 5-piece chicken nuggets, right? When you go to McDonald's, there's a language that they speak. When you go to Burger King, there's a language that they speak. When you go to Apple, there's a language that they speak, right? You would never see somebody who works at Apple talk about Windows products. They only talk about Apple products. So every organization has a language. There has this culture. Thank you. Excellence has its own language, and so as leaders, we have to be able to communicate the language of our organization, the language of excellence, so that we can be able to galvanize and get the hearts of the people that we're leading. Establish that. So we as leaders have to continue to grow in communication. But with that being said, some people are great communicators, but until you know how to connect with others people will not understand you. I'm going to say it again. You can be a great communicator, but if you don't connect with others, they will not understand what you're saying. They will not understand what you're talking about. They will not understand your particular message. One thing that I want us to understand is that misunderstanding is rooted in disconnect. Wherever you find people are having a misunderstanding, it reveals and exposes an area of disconnection. So misunderstanding is rooted in disconnect. When you are not able to connect with others, you're not able to develop a relationship. It creates an atmosphere, it creates an environment for misunderstanding. Think about the relationships that you have, right? Every time there's a misunderstanding, it's because there's something that was there was a disconnect in the communication, right? You said this, or you texted this, or you emailed this, and I thought this, right? But when you have a connection with that individual, they can give you non-verbal cues, and you know exactly what they're saying, right? You ever have those moments where someone does something, that someone that's outside of your circle does something, and you look at the person that you know and you smile because you both are thinking the same thing? Why? Because there's a relationship, there's a connection. So I know when I give you that, when you give me that look, I know exactly what it means. I know when you say this or when you say that, you know what it means. And so, too many times when you find that there's a misunderstanding, you have to check, where is the disconnection. So it's important to understand that, because as people of God, right? As people of God, as leaders, we have to be able to develop connections and not just communicate. See, there's a danger when there's a disconnect. There's a danger when you're not able to connect with someone that you're communicating with. Right? You can say the most insightful thing, right? You can say the most inspirational thing, but it doesn't matter how powerful your message is or how great your vision is. If people don't feel connected to you, they won't follow. You can preach an amazing message. You can have a great vision that's going to change the world. But if you don't connect with people, they won't follow you. See, the thing about connection is that it requires a personal relationship. It requires effort. It requires energy to develop a relationship with the other person, with the other group of people. And so when you're able to develop that connection and you're able to develop a relationship, then people will receive your message. Take a moment. Take a moment and think about the people that you admire and the people that you listen to. Right? What is it about them that draws you to them? More often than not, it's because there's something greater than just what he or she is saying. Right? Something it goes beyond what they're saying, but there's something about that person that you can relate to. Right? What made Barack Obama more effective than Donald Trump? What made Barack Obama, President Obama, more relatable or more effective than President Trump? It's because there was something about Obama that when he began his campaign, he developed relationships with the constituents. He went out on the campaign trail and he went house to house and he spoke to people on the phone, and he showed people that he was more relatable to the people. Right? Donald Trump only was relatable to his particular audience. Right? And everyone else, he uses authority to alienate everyone else. While President Obama, you didn't feel as if he was trying to exert authority over you. You felt like he was just a regular guy that was trying to do better for the country. Right? There's something that happens. There's a difference that comes with communication when you're able to connect. And this is something I say all the time, that people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. People will not care how much you know. You can be the most brilliant. You can be the most charismatic. You could be the most inspirational person in the world. But until they know that you care about them, they won't listen to you. And that's one of the things that we have to understand as leaders, is that if we want people to follow our vision, we want people to follow our ministries, to follow our goals, to follow us, you have to show them that you care. One thing that I've come to learn in my years of experience is that it's not always the most effective message. I mean, it's not always the best message that's most effective. It's always the best connection that's most effective. Right? I've gone to churches where the guest preacher will come, and as soon as they take the mic and they start to speak, right, people are receptive of them because there's something about them that's relatable, that's likable. On the flip side, I've seen preachers take a microphone and start to speak, and people shut off. They shut down on them. They block them out. They get distracted. Their attention gets diverted. Right? And the person can be preaching a really good message, but because of the fact that they aren't able to connect with the audience or connect with the congregation, it caused their message to be ineffective. One thing that I liked about Jesus' ministry is that Jesus served and cared for the people. Right? He sat with them. And I always say this all the time, and people laugh when I say this, but Jesus was a smooth brother in the sense that Jesus would be sitting at the table eating dinner with people, just hanging out, having some bread and some fish, and just kicking it, just chatting it up. And then he'll randomly just bust out and say, the kingdom of God is likened unto a woman who's lost her coin. He'll throw out these random things in the midst of a dinner conversation, and he'll capture the attention of the people. Why? Because of his ability to connect with them. That's why when the Pharisees came and they said, "Oh, how is it that you sit with these sinners?" He said, "Listen, those who are whole don't need a physician." He said, he was letting them know, "Listen, don't rain on my parade. Don't try to bring division. Don't come here with the nonsense." He made sure that he connected with the people, and then he gave them the message. How many times have you seen it? And this is more past just being Christian, but in all kinds of leadership, in speech giving, they tell you if you're giving a speech that you have to first connect with the audience before you deliver your message. And so it's important that we understand that there has to be a connection, there has to be a rapport, if we're going to be effective. See, people, they want to know that you're trustworthy, and they want to know that you have their best interest at heart. Whenever you communicate, or whenever you speak, whenever you post, the first thing that people think is, why should I listen to you? Why should I follow you? Why should I read your post? Why should I watch your video? Why should I listen to your message? Right? That's the first question that people tend to ask, because they want to know that you have the best interest at heart. They want to be able to feel safe. They want to be able to feel secure. They want to know that you're not trying to take advantage of them. They want to know that you understand where they are and where they're coming from. I truly believe that the reason why evangelism is struggling is because of the inability of us to connect with those that are not saved. We fail to connect with them, and because we fail to connect with them, they reject the message that we try to give to them. For the most part, unsaved people have this idea or this mindset about people who are Christians, that we're high-minded, that we think we're better than everybody else, right? These are some things that you hear all the time, where people say that you think that you're better than everyone else. You're all the church is always quick to judge and always quick to criticize. But when we're able to connect and develop relationships, then you will see more people being interested and drawn to Christendom. And so that's why it's important that we, as leaders, as influencers, that we develop this understanding. Because too many people think that it's just the charisma, and it's just the anointing, and it's just the power that gets people to follow you. It's not just that. The anointing only enhances what is there. The anointing comes to do a work, right? But people will follow you when they know that they're connected. I've seen so many times where people have tried to where people have tried to minister to others, and because there's no connection with that person, even though the word may be correct, the word gets rejected. I've seen. It reminds me of this lady, this woman that used to go to an old church that I attended, right? She knew how to speak the language. She knew how to preach. She knew how to tune up. She knew how to hoop. She knew how to do all of those things, right? She knew how to talk the talk. But she never could understand why is it that people weren't drawn to her. Why when she preached, people were disconnected and people weren't paying attention, or people were distracted. And she was the same person who used to come to church late and leave church early. When I talk about no interaction with the members, there was no interaction at all. She would never stay at the church and have conversations with other members of the church. She would always come after church is started and leave right before church is finished. And would wonder why people weren't receptive of her message. It's because of the fact that you did not build a relationship. You did not build any connection. Because she did not try to get to know other people. That when it was come now for her to minister, it wasn't received as she expected it to be. It takes more than just being anointed. It takes more than just being charismatic. It takes more than being able to sing right, to preach right, to prophesy right. It takes more than that. You have to build a connection. You have to build a rapport, right? You have to build that relationship where people can feel safe, where people can feel that you're trustworthy, people can feel that you're not trying to establish your own agenda, but you're really trying to add value, and you're really trying to help them, and you have their best interest at heart. That's what people care about. Not necessarily about how well you can do what you do. You can be a great business person. You can be great at giving speeches. You can be great at all these kind of things. But people want to connect. See, when people are disconnected, communication feels like manipulation. I'm gonna say it again. When there's a disconnection, communication feels like manipulation. So You can be saying the right thing, but people will take it as you being manipulative, as you being aggressive, as you being critical, as you being judgmental, as you being rude, right? It turns them off because there's no connection. But when you establish a connection, it doesn't matter how you say something, when you say it, where you say it, because they know your heart and they know that you have the best of intentions, they'll be receptive of it. And I really want to drive this point, because when we talk about, especially again, I bring back this age-old conversation about about those who are generals in ministry and those who are up and coming in ministry. There has to be a connection. If there's disconnection, then nobody will hear the other person. The generals won't hear the young ones won't hear the generals, right? You see that with the young and the old and the elders, right? The elders will tell you something and you won't be receptive of it. Prime example, because when you think about it, a lot of our childhood behaviors do carry over into our adult life. Do you remember when you was a kid and you were playing and some random adult tried to correct you, told you to stop playing around, stop doing this, stop doing that? What's the first thing that you used to say? The first thing that I used to say, and that my friends used to say, and that my siblings used to say was, "You ain't my mama." Why did we say that? Right? We used to say that because I don't know you, I don't have to listen to you. You ain't my mama. You and I do not have a connection, so it doesn't matter what you have to say to me. I don't care. I'm not going to listen to you. Right? We always used to say, "You're not my mom." I don't care what you say. You ain't my daddy. You're not my father. Right? That's one of the things the first things that we say when someone tries to correct us or tell us to stop playing around. These kind of things carry over into our adult life. So when someone tries to tell you something and they don't have a connection with you, we resort right back to that child mentality of, "You're not my mom. You're not my dad." Why? You and I do not have a relationship. That's what it ultimately means. You and I do not have a relationship, and so what you have to say have no bearings, has no weight in my life. So it's important that we understand. We want to be effective. We want to be great. We want to be able to build our vision and do what God has called us to do. Establish a connection with the people that are around you. We as people are governed by the principle that is not good that man should be alone. God said it as a principle for mankind. Yes, I know we think of it in the terms of Adam and Eve and God giving Eve, the wife, to Adam so that he wouldn't be alone, but it was meant as a principle overall for human beings. It's not good for us to be alone. And so we by nature are relational people. We are built to develop relationships and to develop connections. We're designed to develop relationships. And so in order to be effective, we have to continue that principle and continue to understand that we can't do anything great by ourselves, but we have to have people around us, and so we have to develop positive relationships and positive connections. People want to know, right? They want to know whether or not you're genuine. They want to know whether or not you're authentic. They want to know if what you're saying is really what you mean. So another point that I want us to understand is that people want to know your heart before they know your message. They want to know your heart before they know your message. because they have to evaluate it. They got to check it. They got to make sure that it is something that they can relate to, something they can join, they can connect with, something that they can be a part of. They want to know that it's something that they can participate in and be safe and not feel like they're being taken advantage of. What is it that makes a good job different from a bad job? Right? We will work at a bad job when we know that we have positive relationships and positive connections. The job that I had before I started this, right? So the pay was terrible. If I told you how much my salary was, you wouldn't believe that I was able to support a family and pay bills with the salary that I was making. But what kept us working there, what kept me working there, was the fact that I had positive connections with my coworkers. And so even though management was terrible, even though the workload was horrible, you'll stay in a terrible job when you have good connections. Right? You'll stay in a low-paying, hard job that takes up all your time. But as long as you have positive connections, you will stay with it. It is the genuine connections that keep us going. It's the positive relationships that keep us going. And so it's important that we understand that anywhere we go, anything that we're doing, you got to establish those connections. Let's say it again. People want to know your heart before they know your message. Are you coming from a place of love? Are you coming from a place of care? Are you coming from a place of judgment and criticism? Where are you coming from? Because when people are able to gauge where your heart is, then they'll understand and gauge your message. There was a lady at another old church that I used to go to. This lady, if you on the surface, she seems like the rudest person in the world. She to everybody she was just rough and harsh, and she would say things that were hurtful, that would hurt your heart and hurt your feelings, right? But when you established a connection with her, you come to find, and you get past that rough exterior, which was a challenge. It was a challenge getting past that rough exterior. But when you got past that rough exterior, this lady would give you the clothes off her back. She would give you the last meal on her table. She would do whatever it is to make sure you're okay. You want to know how to get the hard people on your side, to get those that are rough, that have that almost rude kind of demeanor, that kind of that rough personality, is build a connection with them. Because usually those are the people that are most guarded, and when they open up and let you in, they will love you with their whole heart. So many of us, we've gone through different situations and had different life experiences that keep us guarded. We put up walls to protect ourselves. It's a defense mechanism to keep us from getting hurt. And so when you come across someone, she definitely was Jamaican, Minister Catherine. She definitely was Jamaican. But when you connect with, when you are able to develop a positive connection, people will let down their walls and let you in. But they have to first know that you're genuine and that you're authentic. That you're not just putting on a show. That you're not trying to take advantage of them. And so, as leaders, we have that responsibility to develop those connections. Peter was a rough dude, right? You saw Peter, he was quick to draw the sword. He was quick to cuss. He was quick to do all these things. But once Jesus made a connection with him, listen, man, he became the successor of the church. Think about it. Peter was a rough dude. Peter, when they came to take Jesus, cut off the ear of the servant. Cut off the ear. He was like, listen, this is not happening. He was quick. Even when Jesus was like, oh, I gotta go to Jerusalem to die, and he tried to rebuke Jesus. He was a hard dude. But because of the fact that Jesus was able to make a connection with him, he became the leader of the Christian movement after Jesus left. So it's important that when you develop those positive connections, the effect that it has on building your vision and your ministry. We as leaders can't just try to exert authority and tell people what to do and give people harsh instructions, but we have to make that connection. And when you make that connection with an individual, man, it makes a world of a difference. So, what do you need to do to make connections? Right? What can we do? What are some things that we can do to move from a place of just communicating to a place of connection? I think first and foremost, you got to be your authentic self. Right? You can't just be one person in the public and then one person behind the scenes, because then now you come into a place where now it's a form of manipulation. You lack integrity, right? People want to know that you're honest, that you're authentic, and that who you are in the public eye is the same person you are behind scenes, right? One key example, the Wizard of Oz, right? People were the Dorothy and all of them were afraid of the wizard until they saw behind the curtain. What do people see when they see behind the curtain? Are you that same inspirational, dynamic, on fire person that they see, or are you somebody else? So if you want to make a connection with people, you got to be your authentic self. You got to be able to live what you preach. You got to live your vision. You can't just try to preach a vision that you don't believe in and that you don't live. You can't preach a gospel that you don't believe in and that you don't live. So you have to be able to be your authentic self. Right? And then the next thing that you would need to be is you got to be trustworthy. You got to be trustworthy. Can people trust you? Can I trust you with my intimate issues? Can I trust you with my secrets, my ideas, my thoughts, and not hear it from somebody else? One of the worst things you can do as a leader is violate trust. Because trust is hard to build and easy to lose. And so, as leaders, we have to be people of integrity. We have to be people that are trustworthy. Because the moment you break someone's trust is the moment that you lose connection. So we have to be trustworthy. You can't tell me something about you that's personal to you and then I share it with someone else. Right? Because, and this is one of the main sources of church hurt, is that I thought I could trust this brother or this sister and I shared something personal with them, and then down the line I hear somebody else saying the same thing. Or I hear someone else talking about the very thing that I shared on a personal level. We got to be trustworthy. We have to be people of integrity. The next thing that we need to have is we have to connect on a common ground. What is it? Find something interesting about the people that you engage. You can't want people to follow you and only care about what you care about, but you don't care about what they care about. At my old job, there was a gentleman who was our manager. We had two managers, right? There was one who was a company person who only cared about, did you do your job? This is what you have to do for the company, right? And people couldn't stand her. People couldn't stand to be around her. People refused to go to her with their issues or their questions because all she cared about was, are you doing what's right for the company? And then you would share something with her and she would go and tell her manager, right? So she was not very trustworthy. But there was another manager who was, he didn't only enforce what needed to be done or check in to make sure you did your job, but he always checked in to see how you were. And one thing that I learned from him is that you find one thing that's interesting about the person you're talking to, and you establish that connection on that common ground. So because he and I both had children, right? One of the first things he would ask me before he asked me about a project is, hey, how's the wife? How's the kids? Right? We both were married. We both had two children. He would always ask, how's the wife? How are the kids? Before he asked me, did you get this project done? Right? When he found out that I was a minister, he would say, hey, did you preach this Sunday? How was the sermon? He found out what was important to me, and he found a way to identify and connect on that level. So we have to as leaders be able to connect, find the common ground and connect with those that we're leading. It takes nothing to be there for someone and to listen to their cares and their concerns and the things that they like, right? And to develop an understanding based on that level. Because when you show people that you care, then they will care. When you give people what they need, they'll give you what you need. So, what did I say? We have to be authentic. We have to be trustworthy. We have to establish a common ground and connect, right? Then the next thing we have to do is we got to be willing to serve. What made Jesus' ministry so effective is that he didn't come preaching about himself. He didn't come and saying, hey, I'm the Son of God, follow me, obey me, right? He didn't say anything of the sort. Even when he was about to be crucified and Pilate said, they say that you're the King of the Jews. He said it's whatever you want to believe. He didn't come to be served. He came to serve. His ministry was super effective because of that main thing. He told his disciples, they asked the question, how can we sit at your right hand? Who is the greatest among us? They asked these questions, and he said, the greatest among you is the one who is willing to serve. For the Son of Man came to serve, but to serve, not to be served. The Son of Man came not to serve, not to be served, but to serve. We as leaders, it's more than just our agenda. It's more than just our vision. It's more than just our goal and where we're trying to get to. But you got to be willing to serve. Serve those that are on your team. Serve those that are working with you. Because when you serve and you connect with them, then you are able to develop momentum. You're able to develop synergy. You're able to develop a progression. So we have to be willing to serve. We have to be willing to connect. When you have that servant leadership mindset, you'll care about what someone is talking to you about. You'll care about their issues. You'll care about what they're going through. You'll care about what excites them. You'll care about what makes them happy, right? You'll hurt when they hurt. You'll cry when they cry. You'll laugh when they laugh, right? And you are able to establish that connection. And when you establish that connection, they will follow you, right? One thing that I love about hearing about ministry is that when one person is able to properly communicate God's heart and God's mind, right? Because when you hear a word from the Lord, you get a response, or you are able to be effective in the delivery of the message when you give those words that God is speaking, right? When God is speaking and sharing personal things, right? When God says, I love you and I created you for a purpose. Those are the kind of words and messages that are so effective because people want to be connected to God. I know people say all the time that people are always chasing after prophecy and they want to go where the next hot prophet is. And the fact of the matter is not, people are not really chasing prophecy. People are chasing after the voice of God. And people are chasing after because they want to know that God is connected to them. They want to know that they're connected to God. That even though they're going through what they're going through, even though they're experiencing the experiences that they have, even though they may fall short and sin, right? They want to be able to. They want to know that they still have a connection with God. And so it's not necessarily that people are chasing after prophets or chasing after prophetic words. It is they desire to have a connection with God. And so we as leaders have to help them to hear the voice of God for themselves and help them to establish a connection with God themselves. Now, of course, there's an exception to every rule. Of course, there are some who are really just, they don't want to put in the effort to try to connect with God. And yes, they are chasing the prophecy. And those are not the people that I'm talking about. I'm not talking about those people who don't want to read their word and don't want to pray. I'm talking about those who genuinely want to have a connection with God, and so they seek prophetic ministry because they want to know that God still cares. They want to know that God still hears them. That's what I'm talking about. We as people on a natural level, on a spiritual level, on an emotional level, on a mental level, on a physical level, desire connection. And so as leaders, we have to be able to maintain that's willingness to serve and that willingness to connect. Not just to communicate, but to truly connect with people so that they understand that they are people of value, they are important, they're important to the vision, they're important to the ministry, they're important to you. You don't want to leave people and they don't feel that they're important to you. But in order to do that, we have to move past just being great communicators and become great connectors. And so I hope that this was effective. I hope that you were able to get something from it. I do kind of want to open up the floor because, as I said, this is a conversation. So I do want to open up the floor to see if there are any questions. We had some great questions last week, and we had it sparked other conversations. And what I desire is that after this, that it doesn't end with just what you hear tonight, but you continue the conversation throughout your week. You continue the conversation with those that are connected to you. Because ultimately, the desire is to help us to grow as leaders and to grow as influencers and to grow in our calling and to grow and become great. One thing that Bishop T.D. Jakes said is that greatness is defined by maximizing your ability and your capability to the level that God has called you to. And so I want to open up the floor. If there are any questions or any comments that anybody has, feel free to share it. I want to continue the conversation and be able to answer anything that you may have or that you may ask. But like I said, I hope that this was effective because I want us to know that when we get to that point of developing connections, then people and get people to know our heart, it takes away room for misunderstandings. It takes away opportunities for miscommunication. It takes away opportunities of misinterpretation. And so people want to know your heart before they know your message. And when they know your heart, they will always grasp your message. They will always understand your language. They will always understand what you're trying to say. And so I do have a question. Thank you, Minister Catherine. She says, what role does the spirit of love play in our ability to connect? Thank you so much for that question. The spirit of love is the foundation. Love has to be the root. Love has to be the foundation of our ability to connect. Because connection helps to communicate love. Right? I said before that people want to know that you care. They want to know that they're important. They want to know that they mean something. They want to know that they're not just tools to build someone else's vision, somebody else's dream, but they want to be able to know that they're important. And so that can only come from a place of love. When you have love and you have compassion, right, it makes it easier to have connections. It makes it easier because now you put yourself out of the way, right? When you think about love, right, all of the things, all of the aspects of love. Love covers a multitude of sin. So they know that if they make a mistake, they know that they're not going to be ostracized and they're not going to be misjudged or they're going to be mistreated because of the fact that you have love. That all comes with connection. And so the spirit of love is the root. It's the foundation for our ability to connect. You really can't connect without love. Because when you don't have love, you don't necessarily show interest. And when you don't show interest, then you put on. And people can always tell when you're putting on, when you're not authentic and when you're not real. But when you truly love, you care for the people that you're working with. And so that's an important aspect to understand, is that we have to have that love. And we have to have compassion. We have to have understanding. And that will fuel our ability to connect. So thank you for that question, Minister Catherine. I want to talk about the importance of all the different types of leadership styles. But I wanted to first establish the importance of connection. Because connection will play a role in helping us to understand or see why certain leaders lead certain ways. Thank you. Thank you for your follow-up question. She says, how do you achieve oneness with people you want to lead? That synergy you spoke on earlier. So here's the thing. When you establish a connection and you establish common ground with those that you're leading, right? It goes back to creating that language. When you develop that connection, then you speak a common language and you develop a common understanding. And when you develop that common understanding, that's how you develop oneness. I spoke earlier about the fact that every organization has a language. Every organization has a culture. And language and culture helps to create oneness. What connects us as Christians and as people of God is the fact that we believe in Jesus Christ, right? And the fact that we believe in the Word. So we certain scriptures are familiar to us. Certain words and jargon is normal to us because we all now speak the same language. And when you speak the same language, then you're able to develop that oneness, right? Think about the Old Testament story of the Tower of Babel. It was when the people spoke the same language and they were on one accord. They were connected. They built that tower and said, we're going to build a tower to heaven. So because of the fact that they had that connection, they established a culture, they established a language that connected everyone. It fueled their ability to build. And that's what happens with any of us that are building a vision. When you build a team and you're able to get people to adopt the culture and you get people to adopt the language, then you're able to truly build. Right? That's how building begins, because now you develop momentum, now you develop synergy, and now you're able to be on one accord. And so it all feels back to establishing that culture, establishing that language, and being able to connect on that level. One of the first things you do when you get on the job is they onboard you. They tell you about the culture of the organization, the history of the organization, so that you know how to speak the language and how and where the vision is going. And then when we're all on one accord, then you start your job. So I hope that answered your question. Prophetess Asha says, is language built when a group of people come together and spend time with one another, or a combination of branding and unity? Language really is... Oh, did I answer your question already? I want to reiterate, yes. It's all of those things, right? The Bible says to know them that labor among you. Right? When you know the people that labor among you, you develop an understanding of those people that you're working with. Right? And so branding, it's a form of building unity. Sorry, knowing them that labor among you. When you know those that labor among you, know what makes them happy, you know what makes them sad, you know what makes them tick. And when you're able to develop that understanding, it brings you together to build that common language. Branding and unity, all of those things are tools used to help build that connection, to build that language. Because branding helps you to understand where the history, right, the present and the future of that organization or of that vision. And so companies establish brands so that you know how to identify identify the company, identify the vision. Right? You look at brand colors. Pepsi's colors are different from Coca-Cola's colors. And so when you see the colors of Pepsi, you know the vision of that organization. And you know the culture, and you know the language of that. And so all these things are help to build a unified team and a unified direction towards the vision. So thank you for that. Brother Henry, thanks for tuning in. He says, how can we bridge the gap between more senior people in ministry and younger people in ministry? I believe that both need each other, but different approaches and mindsets seem to separate the two. Man, this is the age-old battle, right? It's the wisdom of the older versus the passion and the energy of the younger. What needs to be done to bridge the gap? First of all, there has to be the connection in the sense that both sides have to be open to understanding the other. I think both groups get so set in their ways because they're so separated by experience. Right? It's the experience of both groups that separate them. There are things that when you're older that you've experienced that young people haven't experienced, and there are things that you experience as young people and innovations that are taking place in the young person's life that the older don't understand. And so there has to be a willingness. Back to the point about love. There has to be that love and that willingness to open up and understand one another. When you establish that connection and the young are able to take the experiences of the older, and the older are able to take the innovations of the younger, then you can create a unified, powerful system. The problem comes in when the older feel like their experience outweighs the innovation of the younger. And so there has to be a willingness on both sides, right? That's where mentorship comes in, where you take the experiences and you take the innovation and you combine it to have a greater effect. And so pretty much It's about developing the same language. Again, back to the whole language thing. Developing the same language. How do I, as someone who is young, communicate and understand the language of those that are older than I? How do the elder take their experiences and their challenges and their knowledge and their wisdom and convert it into a language that someone who is younger than them can understand? So there has to be a willingness, there has to be a humility, there has to be a teachability. We all have to have a teachable spirit, regardless of how old we are or regardless of where we are in the spectrum of experience. There has to be a humbleness. We all have to humble ourselves to be understanding, and we all have to be teachable. But what happens is that those who are older, they kind of get set in their ways, and so they don't want to learn the new ways of the younger. And those who are younger feel like the older are outdated and they don't know what they're talking about. But there has to be a humility and a teachable a spirit on both sides so that we can be able to develop more mentorship relationships. One of the biggest challenges that we have is the lack of a mentor relationship. Young people have to stop thinking they know everything and really seek the advice of the mentors, of the elder for mentorship. And those who are older have to stop thinking that they know everything because of the experience, and be able to teach and pass it down. History is passed down from generation to generation because of the elders being willing to share their experiences and their wisdom and passing it down. Before we had Google, before we had internet, before we had iPhones, before we had technology, right? It was the elders passing down the wisdom to the younger. And so we have to stop thinking that we know everything. It's not possible to Google everything. There's some things you can Google, but there's certain things you can't Google. And when you're older, just because you've been through a lot doesn't mean you know everything either. Be willing to accept the innovation. It can't be wisdom versus innovation. There has to be a connection with the two. And so that's what happens, is that both groups are speaking different languages. The older are speaking the language of experience and the younger are speaking the language of innovation. And so we have to be intentional in intertwining and developing a connection and building the same language so that both sides can understand. So I hope that answered your question, Henry. There's so much to this, and it's so important that we understand that we have to be connected. Right? Jesus, prime example of the greatest leader. Whenever he taught, he always said, "I and my Father are one." He never tried to do his own thing. He never spoke a different language. He always made sure to exemplify the fact that he and the Father is one. He said, "What you see me do is what I see the Father do." Because he wanted us to understand that there has to be a connection. And when we establish a connection, then we can be effective. You can't be effective without connection. You can communicate, right? We have all kinds of tools for communication. We have social media, we have Instagram, we have Facebook, we have Twitter, where you can communicate 24/7. But as much tools as we have to communicate, we have less opportunities to connect. And so that's why the world has so many issues now. And so I hope this was helpful. Thank you so much for your questions. I want to continue this kind of format so that we can make it a true conversation. I enjoy the question. The one of the points that I enjoy most is being able to get questions and answer them. And so I appreciate the questions. I appreciate the participation. I appreciate your comments, your likes, your shares. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope that as we continue this week, that we make moves to build stronger connections. That's my encouragement for you this week. To work on building stronger connections. And as you build stronger connections with those who are around you, you can be fortified. You can strengthen your influence. You can strengthen your vision. You can strengthen your ideas. You can strengthen your purpose. And so let's all learn to be not only great communicators, but great connectors. And when we do that, we'll see such a great explosion. So I hope that you all have a great week. I hope that this week will be a week of blessings, that God will bless you and make you a blessing. Thank you so much for tuning in. I love you all from the bottom of my heart. I appreciate you all. And I look forward to continuing the conversation next week. Continue to send your questions. Continue to send your comments. Continue to share it. Start the conversation with somebody. Figure out ways to develop stronger connections. And I will see you next week as we continue on the cross and the crown of leadership. I love you. Have a great night. God